The slap cracked through the small-town diner like a thunderclap. Forks froze mid-air. Conversation stopped. A little black boy, no older than 8, stood there trembling, a red mark blooming across his cheek. The man who hit him, broad, red-faced, and reeking of arrogance, smirked as if he'd just taught someone their place. For a moment, no one moved. The waitress froze behind the counter. The cook peeked from the kitchen window, and the few customers who had been laughing seconds ago now stared in silence, their smiles wiped away by shock. The boy's small hand trembled as he reached for his cheek, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. He hadn't even done anything, just bumped into the man's table while carrying his tray of pancakes. The bully leaned back in his booth, his voice sharp and full of disdain. "Watch where you're going, boy," he muttered, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. Some people looked away. Others pretended to sip their coffee, pretending this wasn't happening. But everyone felt it. That sour taste of injustice spreading like poison through the air. The little boy, Malik, stood frozen. His mother had always taught him not to talk back, not to cause trouble, to stay polite, to keep his head down. But right now, his lip quivered, not from defiance, but from the weight of humiliation pressing down on his small shoulders. A woman near the counter whispered, "Someone should do something," but no one did. Fear hung heavy, the kind that silences even the brave. After all, the man who had struck the child wasn't just any customer. He was Earl Dawson, the owner of the diner, a man known for his temper and connections. People said he ran this town, but the truth was simpler. Everyone was afraid of him. Malik's breathing quickened. The room felt too big, too full of eyes that didn't want to see him. He wanted to run, anywhere, just away. But he remembered what his father had told him just that morning. "Be strong, son. You're never small when you stand for what's right." The irony? His father's words were truer than anyone could have guessed. Outside, the rumble of a sleek black car approached, slow and deliberate, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. No one in the diner paid attention to it. Not yet. Malik's father had said he'd pick him up after breakfast, maybe take him to see the new toy shop downtown. But he was running late. Until now. Malik's tiny voice trembled as he whispered, "You hit me?" The words hung in the air like a fragile thread. Earl chuckled cruelly, his beer belly shaking. "You'll live. Maybe next time you'll learn some manners." The diner's clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Seconds later, the front door opened with a sharp ding. Every head turned. A man in a perfectly tailored black suit stepped in. Tall, calm, with an aura that didn't need to shout to command the room. His eyes scanned the diner, sharp, cold, and unblinking. He wasn't just another man walking in for breakfast. The gold watch on his wrist and the faint scar running along his jaw said more than words ever could. His gaze found Malik. And when he saw the red mark on his son's face, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The waitress gasped softly. Earl shifted in his seat, suddenly uneasy, though he didn't yet understand why. The man walked slowly toward his son, each step deliberate, echoing on the linoleum floor. Malik's eyes filled with tears as he ran into his father's arms. For a few seconds, the world outside the diner didn't exist. The man, Vincent DeLuca, rested a hand on his son's back, steady and controlled, though his jaw tightened with every shallow breath. "Who did this?" His voice was low, calm, almost too calm. Malik didn't have to point. The silence was already pointing for him. Earl forced a laugh, trying to cover the sudden tension. "Hey now, no harm done, mister. Just teaching the kid to be careful. You know how—" But his words faltered the moment Vincent's eyes met his. There was something in them, not anger, but power. The kind that came from a man who'd seen things, done things, commanded fear without lifting a hand. Vincent said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was heavier than any shout. Around them, the customers began whispering. First quietly, then louder. Someone near the back muttered, "Isn't that?" And the rest fell silent again. Realization dawning like a cold dawn, because everyone had heard rumors about a man who owned half the city's clubs and construction sites. A man whose influence reached judges, cops, and politicians. A man who disappeared enemies without noise or mess. The man standing in the diner wasn't just Malik's father. He was Vincent DeLuca, the most feared name in the state's criminal underworld. But to his son, he was just Dad. Vincent's voice finally broke the silence, deep and calm. "You hit my boy," Earl swallowed hard. "It was an accident. I didn't—" Vincent raised a hand, not in anger, but in quiet warning. "You hit my boy." Those words didn't need volume. They carried their own weight, and for the first time in years, Earl Dawson, the self-proclaimed king of the diner, felt small, the kind of small that no money or reputation could fix. Outside, 2 black cars pulled up. Men in suits stepped out, tall, silent, disciplined. They didn't look like regular bodyguards. They looked like soldiers waiting for orders. The customers shifted uneasily in their seats. The air had changed, thick, electric, dangerous. Malik clung to his father's coat, his heartbeat quick against Vincent's chest. Vincent placed his hand on his son's shoulder, his voice soft enough for only Malik to hear. "Go wait by the car, son." Malik obeyed without a word, his small steps echoing on the tile as he left. When the door closed behind him, Vincent turned back to Earl, and the quiet power that had been simmering beneath the surface began to boil over. The man who thought he owned the diner was about to learn what it felt like to be owned by fear itself. The moment Malik stepped out, the tension inside the diner thickened like smoke. Everyone could feel it, a silent, invisible weight pressing against their lungs. Earl Dawson swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing, but it came out shaky, uneven. His fingers twitched nervously near his coffee cup, pretending for a second that he still had control. Vincent DeLuca didn't move. He stood there, his eyes locked on Earl's face. Quiet, patient, terrifyingly composed. The way he stared wasn't humanly angry. It was colder, calculated, as if his mind was already 12 steps ahead, deciding exactly how this man would regret what he'd done. Mr. DeLuca, the waitress stammered, her hands trembling as she wiped the counter. I didn't know he was your boy." Vincent didn't even look at her. "You knew he was a child," he said quietly, his tone even, but it cut through the room like a blade. The cook peeked from the kitchen again, but quickly pulled his head back. The customers sat frozen, the clinking of spoons and chatter replaced by the hum of the ceiling fan. Earl tried to find his voice. "Listen, I didn't mean no harm, all right? The kid, he just—" Vincent took a slow step forward. That single step was enough to make the older man stop mid-sentence. "He just what?" Vincent asked, his voice soft as silk, but laced with steel. Earl's throat tightened. He bumped into me, spilled my coffee. I just reacted." Vincent tilted his head slightly. "You reacted?" He repeated it like he was tasting the words. "You're a grown man, sitting on your throne in your little diner. And your reaction to an 8-year-old spilling coffee was to hit him." Earl's lips parted, but no sound came out. Vincent's eyes didn't blink. "Tell me," he continued softly, "what did that teach you about yourself, Mr. Dawson?" The man didn't answer. His mind was screaming at him to apologize, to explain, to do something, but his body was paralyzed by fear. Vincent finally smiled, a cold, measured smile that made everyone in the diner's stomach twist. "Because where I come from," he said, "men who hit children don't stay men for long." The door jingled as one of Vincent's men stepped in, tall, muscular, dressed in a black suit and earpiece. He leaned toward Vincent and murmured something. Vincent nodded slowly, eyes never leaving Earl. Then he gestured subtly toward the door. The man locked it. The click echoed louder than a gunshot. A woman gasped. Another customer stood, whispering, "What's happening?" But Vincent raised his hand slightly, and everyone sat back down. The silence that followed was heavy. Funeral heavy. Vincent turned toward the waitress. "What's your name?" Rachel," she stuttered. "Rachel," he said evenly. "My boy comes here often, doesn't he?" Her eyes darted to the floor. "Yes, sir. With his mother sometimes. They like the pancakes." Vincent nodded slowly. "And did you ever see him bother anyone?" "No, sir. He's the sweetest kid," she said quickly, voice trembling. "Always polite. Always smiling." Vincent's jaw flexed. He looked back at Earl. "So, tell me again. What exactly made you think he deserved that slap?" Earl's face turned red, from shame, anger, fear. No one could tell which. "I told you," he muttered. "It was a mistake." "I didn't mean—" Vincent's eyes hardened. "No, Mr. Dawson," he interrupted quietly. "It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice." The bully's mouth opened, but Vincent's words pinned him down harder than any hand could. "You looked at my son, and you decided that his skin made him less than you. You decided that his place was beneath your anger." Earl's chest heaved. I'm not... Vincent stepped closer, so close that Earl could smell his cologne. Subtle, expensive, and deadly calm. "I built an empire on reading men, Earl, and right now I'm reading you. You didn't hit him because he bumped your coffee. You hit him because he reminded you of everything you can't control. Because the world's changing, and you can't stand that men like me walk through your door without bowing to you." The words hit harder than any bullet. Earl's mouth twitched, his eyes flicking toward the few customers who were still there, watching him shrink. Vincent leaned down slightly, his tone almost gentle now. "But you made one mistake bigger than all the rest." He paused, his voice dipping into ice. "You hit my family." The silence that followed was suffocating. Vincent turned to his men. "Close the blinds." Every window went dark as the blinds came down. The room now glowed only with the flicker of the neon open sign. The hum of the fan was the only sound left. Earl's breath came fast. "Look, please, I said I was sorry. I'll pay for any damage." Vincent chuckled softly, almost pitying him. "You think this is about money?" He shook his head. "Money can't fix disrespect. It only exposes it." Earl's hands trembled. "Then what do you want from me?" Vincent's eyes lifted slowly, the faintest glimmer of darkness behind them. "I want you to understand what fear feels like when you're powerless. The same way my son felt when your hand hit him." Earl backed up against the booth. "Please," Vincent raised a hand. "Sit down." He obeyed instantly. Then Vincent's voice softened again, dangerously calm. "You see, Earl, in my business, we don't raise our hands to the weak. We protect them. We honor them. You're the kind of man who thinks strength comes from size, or power, or shouting. But real power," he leaned forward, whispering near Earl's ear, "is the silence right before justice arrives." A single tear slipped down Rachel's cheek as she watched. She didn't know whether to pity Earl or be relieved that someone, finally, was standing up for that little boy. Vincent turned toward the counter, where a framed photo hung, Earl with his arm around the mayor, smiling proudly. He studied it for a long moment, then said, "You like being respected, don't you?" Earl nodded nervously. Vincent's tone turned razor-sharp. "Then you should have learned what respect means." He reached into his coat. Not for a gun, but for a sleek silver phone. He dialed one number. "Marco," he said. "Dawson's Diner. Shut it down. Sell the land. Donate the proceeds to the city's youth shelter. Make sure his name's not on a single brick." Earl's eyes widened. No, please. This diner's all I've got." Vincent's expression didn't change. You should have thought of that before you hit my son." In less than 10 seconds, Earl Dawson's entire empire, the diner, the reputation, the illusion of power, crumbled. Vincent stood up straight, adjusted his cufflinks, and said quietly, "You'll wake up tomorrow, Earl, and realize the only thing you ever owned was your hate. And I just took that from you, too." He walked toward the door, his men opening it for him. The customers watched silently. No one dared to breathe. Just before stepping out, Vincent paused. "One more thing," he said, his back still to the room. "If you ever see a little boy who looks scared again, you help him stand taller. Because next time, it might not be my son, and the world might not be as merciful." He left the diner without looking back. Outside, Malik stood near the car, holding his small toy truck. His father knelt beside him, brushed the tear marks off his cheeks, and whispered, "You okay, champ?" Malik nodded, voice soft. "You're not mad, Dad?" Vincent smiled faintly. "Not at you, son." "Never at you?" Malik hesitated. "What about the man who hit me?" Vincent looked down the street, the afternoon light cutting across his face. "Let's just say he'll remember you for a very long time." He opened the car door, letting Malik climb in. As they drove away, the sign above Dawson's Diner flickered one last time. Open, then closed, and for the first time in that small town's history, people began to whisper not about the bully, but about the boy who had the mafia boss for a father. And a father who'd taught the world what true power really looked like. Outside Dawson's Diner, the street had gone eerily quiet. The crowd that had gathered earlier had thinned out, but whispers still lingered in the air like smoke. Everyone had heard something. The slap, the shouting, the terrifying silence that followed. And then they'd seen him, Vincent DeLuca, the name people only dared to say in whispers, standing in the diner, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. The man wasn't just feared. He was mythical. No one really knew how much of the rumors were true. Some said he ran half the East Coast through silent deals and invisible hands. Others said he'd gone clean years ago, that he was just a businessman now. But one thing everyone agreed on: if you ever crossed him, your world ended quietly. And tonight, that world belonged to Earl Dawson. Inside the diner, Earl sat slumped in his booth, staring at the coffee cup that had long gone cold. His hands shook as he tried to light a cigarette, but the lighter kept clicking uselessly. Rachel, the waitress, whispered, "You should leave, Earl. Just go home before he comes back." But Earl couldn't move. His mind was stuck replaying every moment. The slap, the look in that little boy's eyes, the sound of his father's voice. That voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the kind of authority that made even the air obey. He'd heard that tone once before, years ago, when a man in a gray suit had walked into the diner late one night, placed a business card on the counter and said, "Vincent DeLuca says this neighborhood's under his protection now." Earl hadn't believed it then. He thought those were just stories. But now, those stories had faces, and one of them was an 8-year-old boy. Across town, in a penthouse suite overlooking the harbor, Vincent DeLuca stood by the window, staring at the city lights. He'd been silent since the drive back. His men stood at a distance, waiting for orders. Finally, one of them, Marco, his trusted lieutenant, spoke. "Boss, it's done. The diner's shutting down, bank accounts frozen. He's finished." Vincent nodded slightly, eyes still fixed on the view. "Good." But his voice didn't carry victory. It carried exhaustion. Marco hesitated, then asked quietly, "You want me to handle the rest?" Vincent turned to face him. "No, boss." Vincent's gaze softened. "The boy saw enough today. If I let this go further, he'll grow up thinking vengeance is strength. I won't teach him that." Marco nodded respectfully. He knew better than to argue when Vincent spoke about his son. Lily sobbed into her brother's shoulder. Naomi stood, her eyes closed, whispering something that sounded like a prayer. Ethan turned, trembling, exhausted, but lighter than he had been in years. He looked at Naomi. "She's gone." Naomi nodded, tears glistening. "Yes, finally." He stepped toward her, his voice shaking. "You? How did you know what to do?" Naomi smiled softly. "Because I once needed someone to do the same for me." The rain stopped before dawn. Ethan sat on the porch steps, the twins asleep inside, the air still damp with memory. Naomi joined him, a blanket around her shoulders. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Ethan whispered, "If she really sent you, then maybe she knew I couldn't do this alone." Naomi turned to him. "You were never alone, Ethan. You just forgot how to listen." Their eyes met. The silence between them no longer empty, but full of something sacred, like peace finally earned. And as the first light of morning touched the horizon, Ethan realized that maybe, just maybe, love didn't end with death. Sometimes it simply found a new voice, in someone who arrived at the door and did the unthinkable. Morning broke gently over the Grayson estate, a soft light spilling across the dew-soaked gardens, touching the glass walls like a quiet benediction. For the first time in 3 years, the house was alive in a way Ethan couldn't explain. It wasn't loud or busy or filled with laughter. It was simply at peace. Inside, the twins were still asleep. Their small breaths rose and fell in perfect rhythm, their faces untroubled, their dreams, finally, kind. Ethan stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching them. Every rise of their chest felt like a promise he'd once thought impossible. He smiled, a small, trembling smile that came from somewhere deep, somewhere long locked away. He turned to find Naomi standing behind him, her arms folded loosely, her expression unreadable. "They're safe now," she said softly. He nodded. "And free." She looked at him for a moment, then said, almost in a whisper, "So are you." Later that morning, they sat in the garden. The storm had washed everything clean. The marble steps glistened, the roses sparkled with water, and the air smelled of rain and renewal. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Naomi. "You know," he said, staring at the horizon, "for a long time I thought silence was the same thing as loneliness." Naomi tilted her head. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I think silence is just peace waiting for someone to notice it." Naomi chuckled softly. "That sounds like something Amelia would have said." Ethan turned toward her. "You really knew her, didn't you?" "I mean, truly knew her," Naomi nodded. "We met when we were barely 20. She had this way of making you believe in things you'd given up on. She told me once that if she ever left this world before she was ready, she'd find a way to keep loving from the other side." Ethan swallowed, his voice low. "She did," Naomi smiled, but her eyes glistened. "She always kept her word." They sat in silence for a while, the wind moving gently through the trees. By noon, the twins came running through the garden, barefoot, chasing a butterfly that danced in the sunlight. Lily laughed, a bright, pure sound that seemed to echo all the way through the house. Liam followed close behind, his arms stretched wide like wings. Naomi watched them, her face softening with every sound of joy. "You've given them their childhood back," Ethan said quietly. She shook her head. "No, you did. You just needed to remember how to hold them without holding on to your pain." He looked at her then, really looked, at the woman who had walked into his life out of nowhere, carrying more peace than logic could explain. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Naomi smiled gently. "You don't need to. Just promise me you'll live. That's all any soul ever wants for the people it leaves behind." Ethan hesitated, emotion catching in his throat. "Will you stay?" The kids, they love you. He stopped himself, realizing the weight in his voice. We could use you here. Naomi looked down at her hands. Ethan, my work here is done. The words landed heavy between them. He frowned. You're leaving? She nodded slowly. There are other homes like this. Other hearts still caught between grief and guilt. I go where I'm needed. He stared at her, fighting the ache rising in his chest. Will I ever see you again? Naomi smiled, the same calm, knowing smile she wore the first night she arrived. You'll know when I'm near. Peace always leaves a trace. That evening, Naomi packed quietly. The twins helped, Lily tucking her teddy bear into Naomi's bag for the next kids who can't sleep, and Liam, drawing her a picture of their family with a sun above it, and the words, "You fixed the dark." Naomi kissed their foreheads, whispering something only they could hear. Lily smiled through her tears. Liam nodded solemnly. As if he understood, Ethan stood at the door watching, his throat tight. When Naomi turned to him, he wanted to say something. Something that could capture gratitude, grief, and awe all at once. But words failed him. She reached out, took his hand, and said softly, Don't look for miracles, Ethan. Be one. For them, for yourself. And with that, she stepped out into the fading light. He watched her walk down the long gravel driveway, her figure small against the orange glow of the setting sun. The wind tugged gently at her coat, carrying her presence into the distance until she disappeared beyond the gates. The silence that followed didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of memory, of love, of something infinite. Ethan turned back toward the house. The twins were at the window, waving. He smiled and waved back. And as he did, something shimmered faintly in the reflection beside them. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw Amelia, standing behind them, smiling, her hand resting on their shoulders. Then the light shifted, and she was gone. But Ethan didn't feel lost this time. He felt grace. Weeks later, the Grayson mansion no longer looked haunted. The halls echoed with laughter again. The rooms smelled of baking cookies, and every night before bed, Ethan tucked the twins in and whispered, Good night, my loves. Mommy's proud of you. They never woke screaming again. Sometimes Lily said she dreamed of Naomi standing in the garden, talking softly to the wind. Ethan never told her it was impossible, because somehow it didn't feel impossible anymore. Every night, before turning off the lights, he looked at the photograph on his nightstand. Amelia smiling, her arm around Naomi. Two women, one gone, one sent, who had both, in their own way, saved his family. He would whisper, Thank you, and swear the air answered back, soft, calm, and certain. The Grayson estate was finally still. Not because it was empty, but because every corner now hummed with quiet love. And somewhere, far beyond the storm, two souls, one of light, one of earth, watched in peace, knowing they had done the unthinkable, and taught a grieving man and his children how to sleep again. If this story moved you, don't just let it fade. Like, share, and subscribe, because somewhere another heart still needs a reason to believe in love again.